Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 4 of Sonic Insurgency with Patrick McFarlane. I'm your host, Patrick McFarlane. Sorry for the slight delay in coming out with this episode. I had a child, or rather, my wife had a child, so it's kind of set me back a little bit. I've focused on my other projects, worked when I can. But today on Sonic Insurgency, we're going to be talking about a gem of an album that got really great reviews when it came out, and I believe it came out in 2016. But that album is Kingdom of Conspiracy by death metal titans Immolation. Now, Immolation is a band that is very well established in the death metal scene. They are especially in the New York scene. And we'll do a little bio here. Immolation is an American death metal band from Yonkers, New York. Incidentally, that's also where the son of Sam lived, was in Yonkers. I'm sure there's no connection there. But they're considered one of the leaders of the New York death metal scene, along with Incantation, Mortician, and Suffocation. Suffocation is actually one of my favorite death metal bands ever. Incantation is really good, and Incantation has also released some really good albums recently. And who knows, maybe we will touch on them on this show. So, as well, they are one of the best-known bands of the death metal genre. And one of their first albums that they came out with, was considered one of the first death metal albums, Dawn of Possession. So we're not going to be talking about that today, but it was their debut album and their first and only album on Roadrunner Records. And so I believe it's widely considered to be one of the first death metal albums of all time. So that's a great album. You should definitely check it out. But my first introduction to them was this album. And Kingdom of Conspiracy, that is. And I really enjoyed it. And one of the reasons I enjoyed it is because, you have a lot of topics that come across in death metal. There's a lot of things that people talk about. And dystopia is one of the things that I really enjoy. I read 1984 when I was a kid. I read Brave New World when I was a kid. And, there were other ones like Fahrenheit 451 that I really enjoyed. And there, a lot of death metal bands focus on like gore, crime, serial killers, monsters, stuff like that. And not a lot of death metal bands really focus on dystopia. And I think that's really prescient. And I think that kind of a resurgence in dystopia that has happened, especially, I'm sure it was no coincidence, and we'll kind of touch on this, that the election of Donald Trump was occurring while Immolation released this album. But you see a lot of things kind of in, the 2010s, kind of coming up to 2012, because it was in popular fiction that the world was going to end in 2012. So you do kind of see that. But especially here, you see a really successful album talking about dystopia. And if we get here to kind of the interview portion, what the band members have said about the album is basically Immolation talked the Orwellian themes of Kingdom of Conspiracy. And he says, I think the guitarist says, "This is our first concept album that we've done intentionally. People have said to us in the past for different records, is this a concept album? Especially with Majesty and Decay. They really weren't, even though a lot of the themes on those records were connected in some way and kind of applied to the new record as well. Kingdom of Conspiracy conceptually is about the world today, and we've always had that great knack of honing in on the darkest side of humanity. It just talks about the world today and all the really bad things that are happening all over the world." So in one of our, I think it was the first or second episode of the podcast, we talked about, Slayer, and how a lot of bands have focused on crimes against humanity that have happened in the past. That's a natural topic of death and thrash metal. And you would think that more bands would do explicitly dystopian-themed things. A lot of bands talk about things that happened in the past, especially, like with Slayer and crimes against humanity, but also like the glory of war and singing about that. I'm thinking of... Hurdle the Dead. Skinless is a band that has done a lot of like World War One kind of styled stuff, and Bolt Thrower had an album about World War One. So you see those themes a lot in death metal, like war and crimes against humanity, different regimes of the past, but none of them really much have an eye towards the present or the future. He says, normally Immolation touches on religious themes in the past, as well as incorporating politically charged ideas into the band's lyrical subject matter. Doan explains that Kingdom of Conspiracy is more about the human side of the spectrum. He says, it's about how we all play a part in this total unraveling of our world. In a lot of ways, I think we're at a really weird point in our history right now, and I hope things go in a good direction. But there's so many really negative things that are happening right now, and that's kind of what we focused in on. Dolan says that the lyrics also incorporate an Orwellian aspect, which makes the record even darker. He says, when I read 1984 back in grade school, isn't that like elementary school? That's a little early to be reading 1984. He says it was a very dark book to me, and it was a very scary book, and unfortunately a lot of what Orwell was writing about back in 1948 is starting to happen now, he explains. I'd say it started happening a lot earlier than then, but anyways, that's basically what the album is about, and each song has that common thread running through it, and each song is kind of like a different symptom of this sickness that we see today all around us. And specifically what I'm referring to is that, in 1984, a lot of the things that come about are actually observations of what George Orwell was seeing at the time. And especially with this concept of like, oh, well, we've always been at war with East Asia, kind of a direct comment on how, well, we fought an entire war with the Soviets against the Nazis. And then immediately after the war, all of a sudden the Soviets are kind of our enemies. And it's like the regime wants to completely have us forget the fact that we just were allies with this people and now they're our grave enemies. That's just kind of one example. But these other things about, the party determines what truth is at any point in time. And I did, on another project that I have, I did a documentary called The Emerging American Police State. And I'll put that in the description below at odyssey.com, which is a YouTube alternative replacement video site. But I specifically talk in that project about how 1984 and Aldous Huxley's Brave New World are both kind of correct, but they're both correct in different ways. Whereas in this album specifically, Kingdom of Conspiracy is about the Orwellian kind of brutalist side of it, and of like a oppressive authoritarian regime. And what I think is sure, the regime has that brutalist side to it, but I think that's hidden behind like kind of a velvet glove. And the thing about it is that Brave New World was more about controlling the population through not through the bayonet, as he puts it in an interview that he gave. It's not about controlling society through the bayonet, because that ultimately is inefficient, but it's about seducing the populace into kind of believing whatever you want them to believe, or seducing them into apathy, or giving them like perverse incentives to really kind of be apathetic to what's happening around them. And I think Huxley was more correct, I think, than Orwell was. Although Orwell really gets something right about kind of the mind control propaganda, like specifically this idea of controlling culture, or controlling thoughts, rather, culture and thoughts and mind control through the control of language itself. Because there's this concept in linguistics called like lost in translation. And there's this idea that there's certain concepts that you simply cannot convey because the thought is so unique to its original expression in the original language that there's no equivalent in other languages. It's a certain feeling or way of thinking that is completely unique to this word in the native language. And if you control what term is used when you're talking about specific concepts, if the regime can control what word is used widely, then your entire thought of what that word means is changed. Or so, for instance, like the word liberal used to mean someone who believed in human liberty, but now it's some kind of like a progressive interventionist mindset, is using the state as a central planning organization to control behavior. And that's kind of what liberal means, like the progressive era Democrats. And so that hijacking of the word really has kind of controlled people's thoughts itself, their conception of what the word liberal means, and it controls their reality. So he says, with dismal music, this is the article, Immolation's own brand of crushing early 90s New York-style brutal death metal. To match this lyrical concept, Dolan says that the message they convey is as important to them as the music. He says, we've always taken the lyrical end, Dolan, I believe he's the guitar player, as seriously as the music. They go hand in hand. You can't have great music and shitty lyrics, or lyrics that mean zero. So we've always spent a lot of time on the lyrics. I think it's always fun for the listener to kind of take their own personal take of a song. You can have 10 different people read the lyrics to any one of our songs, and they'll probably get 10 different things out of it. But that's good. That's why I liked lyrics so much when I was younger. I still do, but I'm saying when I was first getting into metal, I was always really into lyrics, what the bands were talking about and what was on their minds. And I love stuff that wasn't right up front. I love stuff that you kind of had to dig and think on for a while. Those are always the best lyrics to me, so we try to keep that in mind when writing. And I think that they say, Kingdom of Conspiracy is out via nuclear blast. Immolation are out on a North American tour with Cannibal Corpse and Napalm Death. Find a complete list of dates here. Well, let's go there, because I was on that tour. I went to that tour. So this was the tour: Cannibal Corpse, Napalm Death, and Immolation. And Beyond Creation was an opener. Magruder Grind. This was an awesome lineup. I remember this. And let's see. I think they went to St. Paul. Yeah, St. Paul, Minnesota, and Mill City Nights. I went to that show, so it was a great show, man. It was really awesome, and I don't know if I got into Immolation before that date, but nonetheless, yeah. So to talk more about the music, I absolutely I love this album, and that they completely captured the sound. And I can't play sound on this podcast because of the way that Spotify treats it. And if I play music on this podcast, it will limit the playing and make the podcast only available on Spotify. And I really don't want to do that. So I won't be playing the music, but the music is just crushing. It's brutal. Like, it hits you with a freaking anvil falling on your head. It's awesome. And kind of the dark growl that the lead singer has really kind of feels like this lumbering kind of behemoth, but in a way that when I listen to it, it makes me think of Eyes Wide Shut. And going along with the album art that you see here, to take a look at it, it's a bunch of people. If you're just listening to the audio version, you can find the video version on odyssey.com. You can find this on YouTube as well. And you can also find the show notes pages at libertyweekly.net/Sonic Insurgency. That's where I host this show. And you can check out my other work too. But, you can see kind of on the screen here, the album title, there is people that are chained up, and they have the all-seeing eye on their forehead, the pineal gland. And I can't tell if it's really blocked off or anything like that. Let's see if we can, we can't really make this bigger just yet. But you see it's kind of blocked off, and their mouths are sewn shut, and they're all chained together. And behind him is this monolithic huge tower, and the tower is made up of other individuals who are chained together, and they have their mouths sewn shut, and their pineal gland seems to be locked up. And there's people on what appear to be meat hooks who are being dragged up the tower. And it's really brutal. But when I hear the lead singer, kind of his deep growl, it sounds like the voice of this monolithic conspiracy personified. And I think it gives me goosebumps just thinking about it. But if this sinister nexus of people who conspire, and of course it's not a monolithic kind of thing, I'm sure. But if there are powers that be, there are people who conspire to do certain things. Like the official story of 9/11 is a conspiracy of hijackers that conspire together to hijack the airplanes and fly them into the Twin Towers. That is a like accepted mainstream conspiracy theory. And so I digress, but the lead singer's voice really just sounds like if that sinister alliance of people, the hidden hand that works behind the scenes, was personified as a voice. And it's freaking sick, man. And I just think it's awesome. And it's the perfect kind of voice for something like this. And Immolation does this thing with their musical styles where they have like kind of offbeat, sludgery, kind of like pounding like riffage that they do. And it works really well. And it's kind of reminiscent of there's this Finnish band that I listen to who the name is escaping me, but they do it really well too. So lyric wise, I know that he was talking about the lyrics, and I really just I don't find the lyrics to be super compelling. I mean, for death metal lyrics, they're kind of run of the mill. And there's some things that kind of stands out about the lyrics, the things that they talk about, but they're not poorly done, but they're just not anything like a masterpiece. So there's this song, one of my favorite songs on it is Indoctrinate. And here are the lyrics. So it goes, "Ready the youth for this culture of madness. What a terrible time to be brought into this world. Indoctrinated by a parasitic rhetoric engineered to spread like a fever amongst the innocent. Make them see what you see, make them be what you are. Indoctrination of the young ensures your cause will always thrive. Catch them while they're young, embed your venomous sting, this hidden abscess splinter leaking deep inside of them. Flowing through callow minds, a soothing toxin of promises, altering their thoughts, infecting those within their reach. Bowing their heads in loyalty, bowing their heads in shame, the rituals of conditioning repeated over and over. Legions of disciples, soon legions of soldiers, innocent now, a dormant threat waiting to mature. A lifetime playing host to this lunacy held fast by the barbs of faith, mad and blinded beyond reason, a haze of twisted morals clings to them all. Vessels for their war machine, vessels for their way of life, this ravenous piracy of human minds designed to assure our ultimate downfall. The sadness of wasted life, the sadness of silenced dreams, sorrow for these unwary victims, witness the loss of all identity." So, I don't know, I think you could, like he said, one of the beauties about in writing a song like this is just that anyone can take a look at it and see certain things that they want to see. And to me, I think of, the way that the state indoctrinates children into being soldiers and to fighting for the empire and kind of hijacking what might be good, what people love about this country, and closely associating it with like imperialism abroad or fighting wars across the globe. Thinking that, in order to protect the freedom and way of life that we have here, we have to go across the world and, destroy societies. And that's just what I think. I think of like the Pledge of Allegiance, children being forced to say the Pledge of Allegiance, which was a PR stunt that happened in like the late 1800s. The Pledge of Allegiance was created, and so here's another lyric, "The Great Sleep," and I think this is good because it talks about how people are kind of like, most people are just. And this isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just that most people are apathetic to what happens in the world. They're apathetic to like what happens in their own government, and they don't pay attention, so they don't know. And when they don't know things, they deny that they exist simply because they don't know about them. So a populace unknowing, caught in a dangerous trance, so focused on the meaningless that we failed to see what's real, sleeping away while the storm quietly moves in, distracted and unconscious, lost in a perpetual fog, burdened with hollow desires, failing to see our end is near. sleeping away, now awakening to the nightmare. Our comfort breeds our numbness. Our numbness fools our minds. Now they've fooled us all. It's only a matter of time. Paralyzed by a false sense of worth, what will it take to break through this coma? Our standards have all been broken, oblivious to this vile coup. Falling asleep, falling away from reason, hallucination on the grandest of scales. Slowly we wake, too late to escape the horror unless we march in and take our world away. Now, I would posit that this, I'm thinking about COVID-19 and the totalitarianism that governments across the world have brought up. And I'm wondering whether, like the song Wonders, wondering whether this will be something that causes people to wake up. And I think that we've seen this, that people start to wonder like what's happening behind the narratives that they're being spoon-fed on the TV. But at the same time, it just goes to show that there's more than, it's more than just a binary of being, okay, either you're asleep or you're red pilled or you're woken up and you're privy to that the news is a carefully constructed narrative, constructed by the powers that be that try to make you think what they want you to think. I think that, it's possible to be asleep, but to think that you're woken up because the news has, it's like Mark Twain has said, is that, I believe this was something Mark Twain said, that it is it's better to, I'd take someone who hasn't read the newspaper over someone who has read the newspaper. Like it's better, the sentiment just generally being that it's better to be uninformed than to be misinformed. And that's what the papers do, is that they misinform people. So all in all, this is one of my favorite albums. My favorite death metal albums, because the music in it is very solid. And like this Pitchfork review says, this is not it's not a state-of-the-art death metal album, but it is a state-of-the-art Immolation album. So it says, what this ninth Immolation full-length is, though, is something even more satisfying, a state-of-the-art Immolation LP and a continuation of a hot streak by one of the most rewarding veteran acts in the genre. The Yonkers Band, co-led since its 1988 inception by guitarist Robert Vigna and bassist vocalist Ross Dolan, has never paid much mind to death metal's arms race of extremity. Like their contemporary Suffocation and Incantation, Immolation are currently, a lot of Asians there, Suffocation, Incantation, and Immolation, are currently producing some of their strongest material of their career, an expertly calibrated blend of the Byzantine and the straightforwardly brutal, simply by following their own muse. So yeah, it's awesome. I mean, it's a brutal album. I would definitely recommend it if you haven't heard it. I would give it like an 8.5 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10. It's a really solid album, and it's refreshing to see a death metal band kind of specifically not overtly talking about like political things, but it is overtly political, talking specifically about the dangers of authoritarianism. And usually you see death metal bands are of the left. They're usually progressives. I don't know exactly. I mean, judging by the fact that this band is from Yonkers in New York City, I would bet that they are progressive, and specifically like with just the political climate of the music, like musicians are mostly progressive. Although there are a lot of bands who death metal has to do, and a lot of death metal bands are getting older, and as people get older, they get more conservative, or either that or the politics shift around them, and the politics become increasingly more progressive. And I think that it's refreshing to see a band that talks about authoritarianism without just being like municipal waste and saying, like, screw Donald Trump. Because the problem with that is that they only care about the government overreach when someone that they don't like is in office. So this seems to be something that is timeless, that it's not taking any kind of overt political stance again, except being against authoritarianism. So definitely check out this album. And if you like this content, please comment, subscribe, share. review on iTunes. You can find Sonic Insurgency on iTunes. But otherwise, I think you can find this podcast at anchor.fm/Sonic Insurgency. Either that, yeah, you can find it there, or you can go to odyssey.com and search Sonic Insurgency, or it's odyssey.com/the @ Sonic Insurgency, one word, and colon and the number 4. So not exactly a pretty link, or libertyweekly.net/Sonic Insurgency. So I really appreciate that you guys would watch and listen to this show. And if you like it, like I said, do all those things to help me get the word out. And we'll catch you next time. Hopefully it won't be such a long hiatus between episodes. But I'm looking to release an episode maybe once every 2 weeks at least. So, all right. Peace out, guys. Thanks again.